4. Love Fire Month, 9th month, 3rd day 10:27. Brain left Gazef's home. He looked back and thought about how he would get back, and then he committed the house's exterior appearance to memory. His mind had been blurred from hypothermia when Gazef brought to him here, so his memories from back then were hazy. He knew Gazef's address because he had been planning to challenge the man to a duel someday. However, that information had been gathered by word of mouth, and it was somewhat inaccurate. "There's no sword stuck in the roof." He cursed the information broker who had told him that, and carefully inspected the house. It was much smaller than the noble residences, and it looked more like a commoner's dwelling. However, it was more than enough for Gazef and the husband and wife who lived there with him. After memorizing the house's exterior, Brain set forth. He did not have any particular destination in mind. He did not want to buy weapons, armor or magic items. "What should I do from now on?" His mumbled voice faded into the air. He was not particularly opposed to just vanishing somewhere. In fact, the notion was still quite attractive to him. He searched within himself for what he should do next, but he found only a yawning void within his heart. His goal had been destroyed, utterly annihilated without leaving a trace behind. That being the case, why? He looked down to his right hand, which still held his katana. He still had his chain shirt on under his clothes. It was fear that had kept his sword in hand during his journey to the royal capital. He knew that his blade was useless against that monster who could deflect his best attacks with her pinky fingernail, but going unarmed still frightened him. That being the case, why was he still holding his blade? He could have left it in Gazef's home. Was it because he was still afraid? Brain thought about it, and then shook his head. That was not it. In that case, why was he holding his katana? In the end, the answer still eluded him. Brain recalled the first time he had come to the royal capital as he walked. Some buildings had remained the same, like the Magician's Guild or the Royal Palace, but there were many new buildings which were absent from his memories. Just as Brain was savoring the difference between his memories and reality, he noticed a commotion ahead of him. The noise made him furrow his brows. He sensed violence coming from the crowd ahead. Brain was about to turn and head elsewhere when an old man caught his eyes. The old man wormed into the crowd, like he was sliding his way in. What's that? What's with the way he's moving? He blinked several times, unconsciously gasping in awe. The old man's movements beggared belief. Brain wondered if he was dreaming, or if he had been affected by some kind of magic. Perhaps even Brain might not be able to move as the old man had. It was a godly technique that required one to keenly grasp the will of one's counterpart, or in this case, the flows of strength and motion within the entire crowd. In other words, those movements were at a sort of a pinnacle. His feet carried him toward the crowd without hesitation. Brain shoved others out of the way, and when he reached the center, he saw the instant when the old man struck the younger man's chin. What? Could I have blocked that blow just now? It'd be hard, right? Did he draw away the other man's vision and attention? Am I overthinking this? Still, that was a magnificent strike. You could teach it in a textbook. He grunted to himself as he replayed the punch he had just seen in his mind. Granted, he had not gotten a good look at it, and it was very difficult to measure swordsmen and pugilists on the same scale. Even so, that brief glimpse had made Brain realize that the old man before him was incredibly skilled. For all he knew, that old man might even be stronger than himself. Brain bit his lower lip as he compared the profile of the old man's face to the list of martial exponents in his memory. However, he did not find a match. Who on earth is he? The old man left the crowd in an instant. A teenage boy trailed behind him. On a whim, Brain followed the boy, as though he had been hooked by some bait. His instincts told him that the man had eyes in the back of his head, so did not dare tail him directly. However, if he followed the youth, he would not have to worry about being spotted. From a more cunning point of view, he would still be safe even if the boy was discovered. While following him, Brain sensed several other presences. However, Brain did not care about them. Before long, the two of them turned a corner and entered a darkened area. Brain felt uneasy, because that move seemed like it was calculated to lure him into a trap. Doesn't that kid find it strange? Just as he began to feel surprised, the boy spoke to the old man. The two of them spoke near the turning point of an alley. Thus Brain took cover around the bend and eavesdropped on them. In summary, the boy was asking the old man to train him. As if an old man like that would never accept a punk like that as a disciple. If one were to compare the two of them, the boy would be a pebble, while the old man was a gigantic gemstone. The two of them lived in completely different worlds. How sad. Not knowing how badly you're outclassed is truly sad. Give it up, kid. Brain did not speak those words, merely mumbled them to himself. Those words were directed at the boy, and they were also a frank criticism of an utter idiot who had once thought himself invincible, namely, his past self. He continued listening in, although he had no interest in the brothel, and it would seem that the old man was willing to train the youth up. Brain had no idea what that kid had to offer that interested that amazing old man. What's this? Have I misjudged someone again? No, that can't be. That kid has little ability as a warrior. Surely he can't have any talent. How was the old man going to train him? He could only hear them from here, but he could not see what was going on. Curious, Brain concealed his presence and eased himself forward to spy on them. But before he knew it, a terrifying aura shot through him. He screamed wordlessly. His entire body froze. It felt like a massive carnivore pressing its face against his and exhaling all over him. The oncoming torrent of murderous intent actually dyed the world a different color. He could not even blink, much less move. For a moment he thought his heart had stopped beating. Brain felt that Shaltir Bloodvatlen was the most powerful being in the world, but what he felt now was comparable to her. It might actually have stopped the heart of a weak-willed person. His legs trembled, and then dumped him onto his butt upon the ground. Even I've been reduced to this state. Doesn't that mean that kid's going to drop dead on the spot? If he were lucky, he might pass out first. Brain crawled along the ground, nervously stealing a glance at the two of them. What he saw shocked him to the core, to the point where he forgot his fear for a moment. The kid was still standing. His legs were trembling like Brain's had. But he was still standing. What's going on? Why is that talentless punk still on his feet? Brain could not understand why the youth could still stand while fear had reduced his legs to a puddle of quivering jelly. Did he have some sort of magic item or martial art which resisted fear? Or did he have some special talent? Indeed, there was no way to guarantee he did not possess such an item. However, his instincts told him that none of the above applied as he looked at the kid's wavering back. The answer was hard to believe, but it was the only one possible. That kid was stronger than Brain. Impossible. It can't be. The kid looked like he had been trying himself, but he did not have enough muscle on him. After observing the way that the kid moved while trailing him, Brain had concluded that the kid was hardly talented. And yet, this average kid was standing where he had fallen. What's going on? Am I really that weak? His vision blurred. Brain knew he was crying, but he could not bring himself to wipe his tears. He tried to swallow his moaning, but the tears continued flowing regardless. Why? Brain clutched at the dirt and tried to force himself back to his feet. However, the tsunami of killing will rendered him immobile. His legs refused to move, as though under someone else's control. All he could do was lift his head and watch the two of them. He saw a back. The boy was still standing, even now. The boy could still stand against that old man and his wave of murderous intent. That feeble back now seemed so far out of his reach. Was he really that weak? By the time the surge of bloodlust had dispersed like mist, he had only managed to get back onto his feet. That fact frustrated Brain. The old man and the boy looked like they were going to train further, but Brain could no longer contain himself. Gathering up his courage, he rushed out from around the corner and shouted, "Wait! Please wait!" Brain no longer thought about not interrupting their sparring session, or even picking a good time to make his appearance. The youth turned around as he heard that desperate cry. His shoulders shuddered and there was a look of shock on his face. In his position, Brain would probably have done the same. "First, please let me apologize to the two of you. I simply could not wait any longer." "Do you know him, Shiba-sama?" "No, I do not." "I see, so he was not a friend of yours either." The two of them turned suspicious looks on him, but Brain had already expected as much. "Please allow this one to state his name." "This one's name is Brain Unglaus. Please permit this one to apologize once more to the two of you. I really am very sorry for this." He bowed lower than he had before, and he could sense a slight movement from both of them. After waiting for a sufficiently long time to convey his sincerity, Brain raised his head, and he sensed that their caution towards him had dulled somewhat. "Then, what brings you here?" In response to the old man's question, Brain glanced at the youth. "How did you do it?" As he saw the clueless look on the kid's face, Brain asked once more, like he was coughing up blood. How could you remain standing before that murderous intent?" The boy's eyes went wide. Since he typically feigned a blank look on his face, even this small change signaled a huge emotional upheaval inside him. "I just wanted to know." That surge of bloodlust was more than most people could bear. Even I. Pardon, even this one could not endure it. Yet you were different. You endured it. You stood against it. How did you do it? How did you accomplish such a feat? His excitement was making him repeat himself, but he could not tamp it down. When faced with the overwhelming power of Shaltir Bloodvatlen, he had been so afraid that he had fled. Yet, this boy had faced the same degree of killing will and held his ground. He wanted to know what was the difference between them. He had to find out, no matter the cost. Brain seemed to have conveyed his earnest passion to the kid. He was confused, but he carefully considered the matter before answering. "I don't know. I don't understand it myself. I have no idea how I could take that storm of bloodlust. Still, maybe it was because I was thinking of my liege." "Your liege?" "Yes. As long as I think of the great person whom I serve, I have the strength to carry on." "How could anyone endure like that for such a reason?" Brain almost shouted. But before that, the old man quietly explained his meaning. In other words, his loyalty was sufficient to overcome his fear. Unglaus-san. People can exert great strength for something they cherish. For instance, a mother can hold up a pillar in a collapsing house to save her children, or a husband could hold up his wife with one hand before she falls. I feel that is the power of mankind. In other words, this young man has tapped on that power. It is also not limited to him. As long as you have something which you will not forsake, you will certainly be able to draw on strength you could never have imagined. Brain could not believe it. His goal, the thing he would not forsake, was his thirst for strength. But that was meaningless now. That dream had been shattered with ease, and all he could do was run in fear. Brain's face turned gloomy, and he lowered his head to look at the ground. Then, the old man's next words made him jerk his head up again. Something built up by yourself is fragile. Once you fall, it is the end for you. Do not rely on yourself for everything. If you can build your confidence with someone else and give of yourself for others, then you will not fall even if you suffer a setback. Brain fell silent. Did he have something like that? He could not think of anything. That was because he had abandoned everything else save his quest for the sword. Could be that the things he had discarded in his search for strength were actually the most important things. Brain could not help but laugh. He laughed at his mistake-filled life. Neither could he help the bitter complaint that next escaped him. I abandoned it all. Is it too late for me to take them back? You'll be fine. Even someone without talent like me managed to do it. Someone like you can surely do it too, Unglaus-san. It's definitely not too late for you. There was no basis to the young man's words. Yet, strangely enough, his words warmed Brain's heart. You really are a gentle and strong person. I am truly sorry. The boy froze as Brain apologized to him out of the blue. Brain had taken such a brave lad as a punk and looked down on him. I'm a fool. I'm such a fool. Ah, yes, you said you were called Brain Unglaus. Were you the same Brain Unglaus who fought Stronov-sama to a draw in the past? So you knew that too. Did you watch that fight? Ah, I didn't. I just heard someone talk about it. Stronov-sama said that you were an amazing swordsman, and that you were easily in the running for the strongest man in the kingdom. After seeing your movements and calm poise, I now realize the truth of Stronov-sama's words. Swamped by the sheer force of Climb's goodwill, Brain struggled to stammer out an answer. Thanks. Thank you. I feel I've got a long way to go, but it pleases me to receive such praise from you. Unglaus-san. Sir, please call me Unglaus. There is no need for you to be so formal to a mook like myself. In that case, I am Sebas-chan, but I hope you will call me Sebas. Now then, Unglaus-kun. Being addressed as kun embarrassed Brain a little, but given the difference in their ages, such a term was only fitting. Can I entrust you with Taring of Climb-kun? I believe that will be beneficial to you as well, Unglaus-kun. Ah, forgive me. My name is Climb, Unglaus-sama. Were you not going to be trained by him? Forgive me. Was Sebas-sama not going to train you? I believe interrupted the two of you while you were in the middle of discussing something. Indeed, that was my original intention, but it would seem we have guests. I had intended to call them over. They are here. It would seem they took a while to prepare themselves for battle. Sebas looked off to one side. Brain took a bit longer to look in the same direction. Three men slowly revealed themselves. They wore chain shirts and carried sharp daggers in hands protected by heavy leather gloves. They were not radiating hostility, but full-on murderous intent. Said intent seemed to be directed at the old man, but they did not look like the kind who would let witnesses live. Brain was visibly shocked as he saw them, and he screamed. No way! They still coming even after feeling that bloodlust. Just how strong are these people? If that were the case, then each of them was probably on par with Brain. No, they would be stronger than him. Could it be that their lousy tailing skills were because they were trained warriors who were not adept at following others? And then, Sebas eased Brain's worries. I trust you're aware that I only directed my will at the two of you, right? Even Brain felt that his reply sounded very stupid. The murderous intent directed at Climb-kun was to train him. In your case, it was because I did not know who you were, and wanted to draw you out. Either that, or sap your will to fight, hostility and so on. but I viewed them as enemies from the start, so I did not direct my killing intent at them. It would be bad to frighten him off. Brain was shocked beyond the capacity to even express it as he heard Sebas casually explain the startling truth. Being able to finally control killing will of that intensity was beyond what he knew to be possible. I see. Then, do you know who they are, Sebas-sama? I can guess. Still, I cannot be sure. Thus, I wish to capture one or two of them for questioning. However, Sebas dipped his head in apology. It would seem I accidentally involved the two of you in this. May I trouble the two of you to leave this place? Before that, I wish to ask you a question. Are they criminals? They feel that way to me. They're obviously the evil-doing sort. A fire blazed up in Climb's eyes as he heard Brainer say that. Perhaps this might be getting in your way, but I wish to fight as well. As a man who protects the public order of the royal capital, it falls to me to defend its people as well. It's not like we're sure that Sebas is on the side of good here, Brain thought to himself as he played devil's advocate to that statement. Indeed, given his honest and straightforward attitude, Sebas certainly seemed to be in the right compared to that lot. However, they could not be sure of that. He's really green. Still, he could understand how the kid felt. Even Brain could instantly conclude who to help between the man who had saved a kid from a bunch of drunken toughs and the other men. Personally, I don't really think you need the help, but ch4worldaudio.com. Sebas-sama, please allow me. No, please allow this one to lend you a hand. Brain took his place by Climb's side. Sebas did not need their aid. Indeed, he had even said that they could leave and he would be fine. However, he wanted to learn from Climb, who fought for others. He wanted to choose the path he would never have traveled in the past. He wanted to protect the boy with a strong heart, but whose swordplay was lacking. Brain saw the weapons they were holding, and frowned. Poison, is it? Using a double-edged sword like that indicates they ought to have some experience under their belts. Are they assassins? The daggers they were using were called mail breakers. There were reservoirs carved into the blades of their weapons, and said reservoirs reflected the oily glow of a dangerous liquid. The fact that these men seemed to prioritize agility and ease of movement unlike professional swordsmen was a better indication of the truth than Brain's self-directed mumblings. Climb-kun, you'd best be careful. Unless you have a magic item that resists poison, don't let them nick you so much as once. Someone with Brain's level of physical prowess was pretty much immune to poison, but people like Climb might succumb to strong toxins. They've appeared in front of us, but they're not making a move yet. Are they waiting for the other two people to circle around behind us? Since this is a rare opportunity, why don't we break through them from the front? Sebas deliberately raised his voice loud enough for them to hear, and the men's movements froze. They had clearly been shaken by the exposure of their encirclement plan. That seems about right. It would be safest to crush the ones in front and then mop up the ones behind. It would seem Brain shared Sebas' opinion. However, Sebas himself rejected Brain's words. But that would let them get away. How about this? I'll deal with the three in front, so could I leave the two circling around behind us to you? Brain nodded, and so did Climb. This was Sebas' fight, and they were the ones imposing on Sebas to let them help. They ought to listen to Sebas, so long as he had not made any fatal errors. Alright, let's go. After saying that to Climb, Brain turned his back on the men. The reason why he dared show that defenseless side of himself to those men was because Sebas was around. As he left his back to Sebas, he felt as safe as though he were defended by a thick castle wall. Well then, while it is a shame, please allow me to be your opponent. Oya, please do not harbor any designs on those two, alright? Looking back, Brain saw Sebas with 3 daggers trapped between the fingers of his right hand. He opened up his hand and the daggers which they had held at the otherwise vulnerable Brain and Climb clattered to the ground. The men's killing intent was getting weaker. But of course, anyone would lose the will to fight after seeing their thrown daggers blocked in that way. Do you finally see how powerful Sebas-sama is now? However, you've learned that too late. They were all trapped within the old man's palm. Even splitting up 3 ways would not save them now. Amazing. Climb stood by Brain's side. Indeed, I'd believe anyone who said that Sebas-sama was the strongest warrior in the kingdom. Even stronger than the warrior captain. You mean Stronov, right? Well, that old man is someone that I myself. Sorry, I'll speak in a more relaxed tone now. Even if Stronov and myself went up against him at once, we'd still lose for sure. Oh, here they come. The other 2 men had circled around and appeared behind them. Those 2 were dressed the same way as the first 3. The sound of a sword clearing his sheath came from beside Brain, and a moment later, Brain drew his own blade. They probably didn't keep someone in hiding to throw knives at us because that old man saw through them. Ambushes only worked when they were unexpected. If someone had seen through it beforehand, then they would only be splitting up their forces. The enemy must have judged that it would be better to attack all at once now that they had been exposed. How naive. Climb-kun, I'll take the one on the right. You handle the one on the left. After examining their movements, Brain sensed that one of them was weaker than the other and indicated as much to the youth beside him. The young man nodded, and raised his sword. His unhesitating movements were those which one could only find in those people who had fought for their lives. Brain was relieved that he was not an untested newcomer to combat. Climb-kun ought to have the advantage, but given his opponent uses poison, it might be a close-fought victory. Even if Climb had actual combat experience, Brain did not feel that he was a blooded warrior who had faced poison-using opponents. For all he knew, that might be his first time doing so. Even Brain had trouble against monsters who used flesh-corroding acids or powerful venom. When fighting them, he became overly cautious and could not bring his full might to bear. Should I kill this guy immediately and then help him out? Would that help him? Would it hurt his pride if I went out of my way to help him? Should I fight them on his behalf? Or did Sebas-sama intend to help if there was any danger? If Sebas-sama doesn't step in, does it mean I should? To think the day would come when I'd actually worry about something like this. Brain scratched at his head with his free hand and stared down his foe. Alright, go. Excuse me for using you as a sacrifice to make up for my time spent idle. 3 hits. Sebas stepped into range of the 3 men, who could not even react to him, much less defend themselves. Then he punched 3 times and the battle was over. But of course, Sebas occupied the pinnacle of Nazarik's combat power. He could deal with assassins of that caliber with only the tip of his little finger. The men keeled over, collapsing limply to the ground like cuttlefish. Sebas turned away from them and looked at the battle behind him. Brain had overwhelmed his foe from start to finish, which put him at ease. The assassin facing him seemed to be looking for a chance to flee, but Brain did not let him off. In fact, he even looked like he was toying with his opponent. No, that was not playing with him. Sebas sensed that Brain was running through his repertoire of moves to re-hone his rusty skills. Right, I think I heard him say something about a time spent idle. Also, he seems to be worried about Climb-kun. Thus he's not fighting in earnest so he can come to his aid at any time. He seems like quite a nice fellow. Sebas turned his attention from Brain to Climb. He ought to be alright. The battle went back and forth. The fact his opponent used poison made him a little uneasy, but there did not seem to be a need to rescue him right away. He felt uncomfortable about involving an outsider, particularly one whom he favored in his own matters, but if he hadn't said he wanted to become stronger, I'd have gone to assist him. A fight for one's life is very good practice. I'll help him if he's in danger. Sebas stroked his beard and observed Climb as he fought. Climb blocked a thrust with his blade. A trickle of cold sweat flowed down his back. It had almost hit his armor. A hint of disappointment flashed across the cruel face of the man he was fighting. Climb stabbed forward, measuring the distance between the two of them. He noted that his foe was slowly backing off, and he did not want to let the man get away. Climb's usual fighting style was to defend with the shield and simultaneously attack with the sword. Being forced to fight with only his sword was a tortuous experience. The poisoned blade also made him very nervous. Mail breakers were weapons specialized for thrusting attacks, so he knew he only had to worry about thrusts. Even so, the fact that he could not allow himself to be so much as grazed by the weapon made his movements stiff. He calmed his breathing, which had been thrown into disarray by his physical and mental fatigue. The other guy's the same too. I'm not the only one who's tired. His foe's forehead was covered in sweat. The man used his agility to make a mockery of his foe, which was a truly assassin-like way of fighting. Thus, wounding any of his limbs would make him lose the advantage and upset the balance of fighting power. The battle would be decided in one hit. This was the source of both parties' tension. Granted, all evenly matched battles were like that, but it was that much more obvious in this fight. With a sharp expulsion of breath, Climb swung at his foe. The swing moved slowly and he did not put much force into it. That was because he would leave himself wide open if he went for a full swing and his opponent dodged. The assassin easily dodged it and reached into his breast pocket. Climb observed the upcoming attack and kept an eye on the assassin's hand. A dagger flew forth and Climb cut it out of the air with his sword. He had been lucky. He had managed to deflect it since he was paying attention. However, he could not breathe easy just yet. The assassin had already lowered his stance and slid into attack range. This is bad. His spine turned to ice. He could not block the follow-up hit. He had swung too hard when deflecting the thrown dagger out of fear. His sword was now hanging out of position in mid-air, and it was too late for him to turn it back to intercept his foe. He thought to evade, but the assassin's agility was superior to his own. There was nothing else to be done. Maybe he could use his arm as a shield. Just as he resolved himself, the incoming assassin clutched his face and stumbled backwards. It would seem a bean-sized pebble had struck the assassin just above the left eye. Climb's perceptions, heightened by the dangerous situation, confirmed that fact. He knew who had thrown it even without looking back. Sebas' voice from behind him was the best proof of that. Fear is an important emotion, but you cannot be ruled by fear. I have been watching you fight from just now, and I feel that your fighting style is too plain and conservative. If your foe had been willing to sacrifice one arm, you would assuredly be dead. If your physical abilities are inferior to your opponent, then you must defeat them with your spirit. The strength of one's will can sometimes surpass the weakness of one's flesh. Climb answered, yes, in his heart, and he was quite surprised to find himself much more relaxed. He did not feel like he could depend on someone else to watch him, but he was relieved that someone else was watching him. Of course, his fear of death was not completely gone, but even so. If I die, please tell your Renaissama, Her Highness, about my glorious battle. He expelled a long breath, and then silently brought his sword up into a ready stance. Climb sensed a gleam in the assassin's eyes that was different from just now. It had only been a short while, but he felt like he had connected with the assassin's spirit on some level during this life-or-death struggle. The assassin sensed that Climb was prepared for death, and he seemed to have placed his life on the line as well. He stepped forward, without saying a word, of course, and closed the distance in a single move. After verifying the assassin was within his attack range, Climb brought his sword down in a scything chop. At that moment, the assassin leapt back. It would seem the other man had gotten the measure of Climb's swings and had used himself as bait to make a feint at Climb. However, the assassin had forgotten one thing. Perhaps he might have grasped the speed of Climb's. However, he did not know this move. Climb had the utmost confidence in this downward strike of his. It was faster than all his other moves, and more forceful. The chop at the shoulder was stopped by the chain shirt, and so it did not cleave the man bodily in two. However, it easily broke his clavicle and crushed his flesh along with his shoulder blade. The assassin collapsed heavily to the ground. He was drooling from the intense pain and howling in agony. Magnificent! Sebas appeared behind him and casually stomped on the assassin's belly. With that, the assassin fell silent, like a puppet whose strings had been cut. He must have fainted. From the corner of his eye, he saw that Brain had already finished off his assassin. He waved casually to Climb to celebrate his victory. Then, I shall begin the interrogation. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Sebas brought over one of the men and slapped him awake. The man regained consciousness with a shudder, and Sebas placed his hand on the man's head. Sebas had not used much force, but within 2 seconds the man's head lolled back, then snapped back to its original position like a pendulum. The man's eyes were now unfocused, like he was drunk. Sebas began asking questions. The assassin, a man of a traditionally tight-lipped profession, sang like a canary. Faced with this bizarre sight, Climb asked Sebas, "What did you do to him?" "This is a skill called the puppeteer's palm. Fortunately, it looks like it worked." Climb had never heard that technique before, but he frowned at what the man was saying. They were assassins trained by 6 arms, the strongest combatants of 8 fingers. They had apparently followed Sebas in order to kill him. Brain asked Climb, "I don't know much about them, but 8 fingers ought to be a major crime syndicate, right? I think they have connections with some mercenaries." "Yes, and 6 arms are the scariest of them all." 6 arms refers to the 6 fighters who make up the organization's strongest fighting force. I heard that each of them can rival an adamantite-ranked adventurer. However, I'm not sure exactly who those 6 people are, since I'm not too clear on the details of their organization. The man went on to say that Succulent, the one who had visited Sebas' house, was a member of 6 arms, known as Devil of Illusions. His plan was apparently to eliminate Sebas and do as he pleased with the young lady of the house. As he heard this, Climb felt a chill wind blow over him. The source of that cold was Sebas. Sebas slowly rose, and Brain addressed him. "What do you plan to do next, Sebas-sama?" "I have decided. First, I will destroy that troublesome place. Besides, it would seem that Succulent is there as well, according to this man. It is best to stamp out fires before they can grow." Brain and Climb both inhaled sharply at that casual answer. The fact that he had declared his intention to fight his way into the enemy headquarters indicated that he was confident of defeating an adamantite-ranked adventurer, in other words, a man whose fighting power was at the zenith of human achievement. However, neither of them was surprised. He could defeat 3 skilled assassins in the blink of an eye, and even the renowned Unglaus-sama showed deference to him. What sort of man is Sebas-sama? Could he be a retired adamantite-ranked adventurer? Also, I hear that there are other captives in there. It would be best to move quickly. That makes sense. If the assassins do not return, it will arouse suspicion. We will not be able to save the captives if they are moved elsewhere. Sebas was in a situation where time was not on his side, but on the enemy's. Then I shall be heading there presently. I apologize, but I am set in my course. Can I trouble the two of you to drag these assassins to the nearest guard post? Please wait, Sebas-sama. If you don't mind, could you let me? Could you let this one lend you a hand? Of course, that is only if you are willing. Me too. Protecting the peace of the royal capital is my duty as Renisama's loyal servant. If the kingdom's citizens are being oppressed, this sword of mine shall hasten to their aid. I don't think Unglaus-kun will have a problem, but it might be a bit dangerous for you. I understand that. Climb-kun. I guess Sebas-sama thinks you might get in the way, no? Although, I'm probably the same as you in his eyes. No, that was not what I meant. I was simply worried about you. I hope you understand that I cannot protect you like I did just now. I am prepared for that. What I am doing next might not win honor for you or your mistress, you know. I feel that there will be other chances for you to stake your life in battle, do you not think so? If I watch mutely from the side because things are dangerous, that'll only prove that I am a man who does not deserve to serve his mistress. Just as my mistress saved the common folk, I too wish to do everything I can to lend a helping hand to those who are in dire straits. Just like how she reached her hand out to me. Sebas and Brain looked at each other. Perhaps they had sensed his iron determination. Are you prepared for this? Sebas asked. Climb nodded. I understand. That being the case, there is nothing else to be said. I hope the two of you will lend me a hand. End chapter.